Digital transformation, what is it and why would you care about it? Well, think about digital transformation this way. Your organization is probably using emerging digital technology. So you're adapting your processes to transform how you do work. But what about your content? Are you transforming your content so that it meets your business goals? For example, is your content well described so that it's easy to find? Is it consistent? Is it easy to translate? If not, it may be time to consider a content transformation strategy. Welcome to Dope Content. I'm your host, Laura Burgels, and with me is co-host Scott Smith. And our special guest today is Val Swisher. Val is the founder and CEO of Content Rules. She believes that content should be easy to read, cost-effective to create and translate, and efficient to manage. Her 2021 book, The Personalization Paradox: Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Creating Personalized Experiences at Scale, is available now from XML Press. Now, Val, can you take a few minutes to tell us more about content transformation? Because everyone wants to talk about digital transformation, but why should we be talking about content transformation?
You know, it's amazing to me. Digital transformation makes all these promises, right? Things like improved customer service, more sales, better service, improved experiences, personalization. And never do you actually hear about what do you actually need to do to the content to make digital transformation work. It boggles my mind. What I have seen over and over and over again is what I call the bright shiny object syndrome, which we all know about, which is tools, right? So I get customers calling saying, oh, I'm doing digital transformation and I need new tools. I need a marketing automation system or a digital asset manager or AI. I want to use AI. And I think, gosh, tools do not create an experience. New tools without new content doesn't make any sense. In fact, I have this saying, if you take a bright new expensive tool and you throw the same crappy content into it, you end up with expensive, crappy content.
So what do we need to do instead?
Well, goodness, we really need to look at the content and make sure that it is prepared for all these new experiences and personalization and platforms. There are some very, basic things that we need to be doing to our content that it's not necessarily rocket science. First of all, we have to pay attention to it. I mean, it goes without saying. What we've been doing up to this point really has been trying to make one size fits one content. It's really, we've been just starting at page 1 and going to page 300, or if it's marketing content, hopefully it's not 300 pages. But we've really just been creating monolithic blocks of content, which is, it's where I start and I go to the end, and I don't think about reusing that content. I don't think about consistency. I don't think about redundant content. I don't think about how easy is it to find content that I'm promising to my people now that I've, done all of this digital transformation, fancy new tools stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would say that, to start with, we need to move away from monolithic content, because that's been it's the bane of everyone's existence across all verticals. I mean, everything from software, content, hardware, manufacturing content, finance, even pharmaceutical content, which we deal with a lot lately.
What do we need to do as content creators to take a look at this, and what should be some of the first questions that we're asking as we're creating, or even before we create that content?
Yeah. So, there's two different sets of things that I think we need to do. One is four steps. The first step is find your content. I cannot begin to tell you how companies have lost control of their content. They don't know where their content is. They know they have too much. They know it's not working, but they don't exactly know where everything is. So step one is located. I mean, every repository, every content management system, every hard drive, emails, backs of napkins, whatever it is, source code management, find your content.
Okay, and I know that's only step one, but do they even have a process for archiving and finding that in many cases?
No, they don't. They don't.
Okay.
Or this silo has a process and that silo has a process, and that silo does things their way, and never the twains shall meet, which is wasteful, expensive, redundant.
So I'm sorry it took you down that path, but it's like step one was a really big step for a lot of organizations. And that whole step in itself requires its own process for, we need to get our findability straight.
Well, one thing that I see is that we are now at a point, because of it's so easy to fire up a cloud instance of any content repository. I would think that most organizations don't even have any idea how many repositories they have, let alone where that content is. And it doesn't matter if you have one or 5 or 10 or 20 content repositories. There's going to be a lot that transmission via email attachments, Slack. When people say, send me the latest and greatest, that's going to cause problems downstream. And it's very convenient, saves you 15 seconds or 2 minutes finding it from the original repository or the authoritative source, if there is one in your universe. But it's causing problems. My point is that it's very easy to clone content, but with each revision cycle, they're not all going to get updated. So your identical twins become fraternal twins, become complete strangers over time.
I've never heard it described that way, and that's a great way to describe it. That you start out with identical twins, then they're fraternal, then maybe it's a sibling, then it's your great aunt, your second cousin 3 times removed, and then all of a sudden you don't even know that person. That
Right.
is such a great analogy that I may have to steal, because it's just so accurate. But if you think about it, we have 2 choices, right? We can either find the content we already have or start all over again, writing content in a way that can actually support digital transformation. And most companies should do a combination of the 2, because there's plenty of really good, really valuable content sitting out there someplace in some repository somewhere that somebody wrote because you read it 6 months ago and it was brilliant. You know where I'm going with this. But I think that locating all your content really is important. I'm a big believer in, let's do an inventory. Let's find all of it and who wrote it and when was the last revision, and let's categorize it, and let's look at the analytics. Is anyone even looking at this content? Why do we have it out there on our website? If nobody's looking at it.
The analytics is a really big thing for me, because there are people that are very very tied to very obscure pieces of content in the organization. But your analytics, whether that's your internal search or whatever analytics you may be using, you may find that nobody is ever looking at it or using it.
It's a sad thing. It's a sad thing to be really proud of something you've written and then just really have to come to terms with the fact that nobody's looking at it. It is, and I think as content creators, you know, we get somewhat attached to content, especially when we're proud of it. But that doesn't mean that it should necessarily stick around forever. If it's not being accessed, then it kind of doesn't have any value. You're just spending a lot of time and money keeping track of it, or not, and then you've lost it. So what was the point of it anyway? So
I feel that pain acutely, because I will go back and look at some of that content, find that nobody's looking at it, but still do not want to let that go. I will still think, how can I repurpose that? Was it not popular or not being used because it was the wrong time for that? So I can, gather that back and say, maybe we can republish this in another location or in another format or in another area or in a different packaging. I am loath to let it go entirely. Is that a common thing that you run into, or is my feeling on that of, Laura, let that go? Or would you say,
just let it go?
Just let it go, Laura? Or would you say, just try not to make this piece of crap content work now? Or do you advise people to just let it go?
I'm of two minds on that.
Me too.
Yay! On the one hand, we did put our heart and soul and effort and knowledge and everything else into the content, and maybe there is value in it, but the just as you're saying, either the way we presented it isn't quite meeting the need, or maybe there's a gem, a nugget in there that we could pull out and do something with. I am all in favor of repurposing content rather than creating more content. On the other hand, there does come a point where you have to come to terms with the fact that I might think it's great and everybody else thinks it's horrible. Everybody else gets to win at that point. I have to just kind of retreat. So I think it really depends on the content itself and its usefulness and how you presented it the first time, and is it outdated, is it not? But I'm a big believer in repurposing where we can.
And we need to think about that as we're creating it, right? It's like, how am I going to create this for findability? Or is this going to be an evergreen piece of content? Is this going to be a temporary piece of content?
Exactly. And that actually is the second step,
okay.
Which is once you've found everything, now you have to figure out what, I usually think of it in three different buckets. There's content that you're going to kind of want to take you with you, right? There's content you're going to want to work on. There's content that's important. It could be evergreen. It could be just the latest thing that's still there. So there's some content that is going to be popular, still in use. You update it often. It's highly visible, right? Then there's probably going to be content that's the opposite. It's outdated, it's old, it's now inaccurate. There's really no point in spending any more time or money or effort on this content. And then there's the content that's sort of in the middle, where it's good content, but you kind of need to work on it. Right? You can't just, it's not good as is. You're not going to throw it away, but there's that. And that's usually the biggest bucket. I hate to say it, because
it is the biggest bucket. It's the most frustrating bucket.
It's really true. I mean, even, I'll write a blog post or an ebook or a white paper, and I'll go away from it for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I'll come back and I'm like, I could really do a better job on this, or gosh, things have changed so quickly already, that sort of thing. When you look at transforming your content, you're going to have content that you're going to want to take with you and work on. You're going to have content that is important, but you don't necessarily want to spend the time on now. And then there's the rest of everything that you've been hanging on to for reasons nobody knows anymore, because it's 10 years old and everything's end of life. And, you know, it's kind of like the IRS and your taxes. Like, how many years, you know, I just got rid of taxes from like 1994. Like, how many years do I need to hold on to this? It's the same with content. You know, think of your content like taxes. So,
you know, you say that, but it's kind of true. How often should we be doing that review? Because we don't want it to be 1994, or do we? Is there some kind of guideline that you have of, okay, we're going to do our dumps and take a look at this? Is there any guideline for that?
yeah, that's a really good question. So in my experience, if you've managed to go through and inventory all your content and now you're sort of starting fresh, if the ideal is to keep control over your content, to know where your content is and how old it is and everything else. There's no hard, fast rule, because different verticals have different requirements, regulatory. Some content and products don't change that often. Others change very frequently. But I would say that, I hate to go to tools, but modern tools will really allow you to keep much better track of your content. You'll be able to know, when was the last time this was published? There's all kinds of reports we can get. So I wish I could say, you know what, every 2 years, go through your content every 2 years, but it really depends. But the newer tools will actually allow you to run reports along with your analytics in trying to keep up with it, you know, every year, every 6 months.
Sorry, my thinking has always been that there should be some level of audits and inventories ongoing, but I think they tend to happen when somebody has blessed a project, which is great that we're having a new project, which is going to include audits and inventories, but so many things tend to go on. There's, well, we're going to do a new database, we're going to rebrand stuff, and we're going to migrate stuff and all that. And I think that the inventory and audits probably get pushed aside fairly often, but a lot of things can happen with features that are built in. If your file management, document management, digital asset management tool does a checksum and says, oh, this file is already here, we don't need to add this, or it kicks off a workflow to say, I want to add it, rename it, or what have you. And I just think that that would be, you know, use of, your business analysts, your DBAs, your Unix administrators or Windows administrators. Let's find duplicates. We're not in the midst of a project, but duplicates are going to cause problems for the reasons that we talked about earlier. I think that the audits are going to involve more of a human intervention. That's probably a little harder. You have to probably bake some really nice cookies or something to get that accomplished when there's no project money.
Well, I mean, that's a great time to do it, right? When you're not in the midst of some other big initiative,
right?
Is a great time to curate again, right? Curation should be an ongoing process.
Right. Yeah, and it's usually it happens when some decision maker comes back from a conference and they learned a new acronym, and they have to move everything to that acronym.
Sad but true, Scott. So sad but true. It really is. Absolutely. So you found the content and you've put it into the buckets.
Step one, step two. Now we're on to step three.
Now you have to decide how you're going to work on the content.
Okay.
Because there are a few different ways you can approach your content in order to make it available for digital transformation, in order to transform the content for digital transformation. So we're looking at taking monolithic blocks of content and chunking them into smaller, nimble components that are mix and matchable. right? That's how I can deliver on digital transformation. I can't deliver on it when I have huge monolithic blocks. So there are a few choices. Sometimes people choose to just convert the file format and put your content into a new repository. And the most common conversion that I see is going from something to XML of some flavor. That's the most common that I work with, whether it's Word to XML or InDesign to XML or whatever it is. And doing that accomplishes just being able to take the files and put them someplace else because they're in a new format. It doesn't really change anything about the content itself. The next is to revise. To do that, you have to convert the content, but to also do some revision on it. So for example, you might organize the content according to a taxonomy that you've developed, or you might tag it with metadata so that it's more easy to find, easy to search for and find. Maybe you're doing this dedupe process, right? So I found everything and now I realize I actually have 6 of the same thing. Fancy that. And they were identical twins and now they're third cousins twice removed. So dedupe the content, consolidate the content. The third way, which of course is my preferred way, is not only are we going to make the file formats right, not only are we going to chunk it and follow our templates, our content models, but we're also going to standardize it so that we're all using consistent terminology, consistent grammar rules. Am I coming? Am I going? Am I present tense, past tense? Consistent style. Are we going to use that Oxford comma? Pick one. I don't care which one, just pick one. Consistent voice, consistent tone. Is it obvious when someone sees my content that it is my brand? So in the perfect world, you have found all your content, you have bucketed it, you've chosen the content you want to work with to transform. Now you've gone about the process of chunking it into small pieces. You've tagged it, you've organized it, and you have made it consistent. And you only have one of anything, but the key to succeeding with digital transformation is in the mix and match. Because otherwise you can't scale. I can't keep writing and writing and writing. So I need to do the mix and match. To do the mix and match, I need to use the same terminology. I need to use the same style. And people don't actually do this. It boggles my mind. I don't understand why we're not all jumping on the, oh my gosh, we need to fix the terminology. In digital transformation, nobody talks about terminology, but do you want to present a seamless experience to your customer, or do you want them to be confused?
We were talking about the standards issue, just a client of mine the other day, which was, it would be lovely, wouldn't it, to have this standards guide so that we're all writing the same thing, and all of us who are, writing the content have that in mind, and that's what we do. Write that, and then we'll all write to that standard. And then the discussion was, is that the way to do it? Do we want to start with a standard and write to it? Or do we want to back ourselves into a standard and let people write and then see which one will win? And I'm like, that's really interesting. Which one is appropriate for the organization?
I had this exact conversation with a customer this week on, do we force a style guide onto our content creators, or do we look and see what have they been doing? What's sort of the natural inclination, if you will, and sort of back it out? And my opinion is we do both. That if, unless you're starting with a brand new team and you don't have anything and you're in a startup, which you're probably not thinking about these things anyway, which doesn't happen. It does not make sense to me to all of a sudden decide we're not going to allow contractions when for 7 years everybody's been writing with contractions. It's a silly thing to do. And all of them like that are, what's the point?
Right.
So I'm
And
of the opinion.
yeah,
of
can you imagine how as a writer, they would get so upset if somebody just passed on a penny ante rule like that? You would have a revolt on your hands like you wouldn't believe.
No, this happens all the time. This happens all the time, particularly when companies start using optimization software and nobody's bothered to check with the people who have to use the software. So, you know, there are software packages where you can program in your style guide, program in your terminology. And then when the author writes something, it's checked against your standards, not the Chicago Manual or the AP Styler, your standards. Well, if you have just decided to take some new standards and make everybody use this software where, by the way, their writing is scored, they get a score, it's just a disaster in the making. You're much better off looking at the general way people have been writing, making note of all of those. Now, might there be something you want to change? There might be. Okay. You know, you can pick a few, pick one or two and explain and say, oh, we're going to do it this way now. And then create the style guide. And then if you're going to use optimization software, then take those rules and program them into, you know, one of those packages. I'm also of the opinion that writing a style guide doesn't work. Nobody has the time to actually go find the style guide and say, gee whiz, am I allowed to use, you know, a contraction or not? So I'm a big proponent of these different software packages that they're there. You don't have to look anything up. It's right there for you, but you have to be sensitive to doing this. Digital transformation will not be successful if your content is all over the place, because the mix and match will be mass confusion on the other end. But we also have to be sensitive to the people who've been writing this stuff for, you know, 20 years and take everything into consideration.
What was your aha moment when you started to see, you know, why people would want to go with modular content instead of writing, go give me 500 words of copy, but versus like, you know, a model where we're going to write a standalone topic.
Yeah.
And we're going to aggregate these topics. So we're going to personalize it. We're going to make the translation easier.
Yep. Well, my aha moment was back in 1992, 1993, when I was 12 years old. No, I wasn't. I was working, I wish, I was working for a now defunct networking company, and I managed technical training development. And actually, it was before that, I was a writer, right? I was creating technical training. And I had a cohort who was creating technical documentation. We were both writing about the same product. So I got together with her and I said, you know, how about we do this? Why don't you write all the conceptual stuff? And I'm going to go into the lab. I'm going to write some lab exercises. And then you can use my lab exercises as your configuration examples. And then, so you can do that and I can do this, and she's writing in Word and I'm writing in FrameMaker, and, you know, we're copying and we're pasting, and the twins are being born. And then I went on to manage that department, and really in the 90s struggled with reusable content. And it was very, very clear then that she and I were writing the same content. We were both being paid salaries we were ending up with the same poor user was going to read the manual and go to the training, and we weren't necessarily describing things the same way when
Right.
we should. So that's when it became clear to me. And way back then in FrameMaker 3.1, we were able to import chunks of content by reference.
Right.
And I went on like a whole political, like, we need to do this. And of course, it was not manageable because we didn't have content management systems.
Sure.
But that was when it was an aha moment to me a billion years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember a video you did. I think it was posted on your site where you talked about why modular content, which has its roots in technical communication, where mistakes are high stakes, and and you had some reasons why it hadn't caught on in contexts like marketing, and one of them was the tool sets that marketers use. Marketers don't use FrameMaker. They don't use a lot of modular based content. They're using Word and InDesign and then Photoshop on the graphics side. Do you still feel that's the case? I know that there are people that have done customized solutions to allow XML based imports and exports with InDesign, which I would have thought that Adobe would have totally fixed this whole structured content deficiency in marketing like about 10, 15 years ago, but they haven't.
It's still the same problem that it's always been.
Okay.
And I would say that the biggest problem that we have with the current tool sets, even for TechDoc, is that you have to be a programmer
Sure.
to be able to use them. As much as I love Oxygen and XMetal like the next person, I use them all the time. We have not done a very good job of front-ending the tools. That's the first problem. The second problem is the format problem. The second problem is even when I'm writing marketing content, I'm thinking of how it's going to be delivered, which is good and bad, which means I'm probably not making it reusable to begin with, but I'm really thinking format. I'm thinking web page, right? I'm writing this copy for, this type of web page. I'm writing this copy for a case study. So I'm thinking format, and the tools that we have today are not very good at showing me what it's going to look like until I click publish.
That's a very good point, because with somebody that's doing creative work, it's the format and the content are merged in their mind. So the tools don't have any reason to separate the content and format like they do with, like, in technical communication.
Yeah, exactly. But that means that marketing content is not being single sourced. It's not being reused, and I'm not reusing across the silos.
Right.
Wouldn't it be great if marketing wrote a really great description of the product that I could then put into module 1 of the training course? But it's not done in a reusable way, other than I'm either going to copy it and paste it or retype it, and now I've got multiple versions. We have not solved this problem.
That's been something I've envisioned, but I thought of it more of like the technical writer, naming the attributes showing up in the broadcast copy.
Well, it can go,
right,
either way, right? Or I write lab exercises that then become configuration information,
right?
And I write something that is also in the knowledge base because people couldn't figure out how to configure a certain something. And there's a knowledge base article about it. I should be single sourcing all of these things, all of the content across the enterprise. If I want digital transformation and I want to deliver all these things, we have to do things a different way, because it's the only way to scale. It's not that I can't write it 7 times. It's that then I have to translate it 7 times into 20 languages. And now I'm storing it. And oh my God, someone changed something and I can't even figure out where I have to change it. It's not scalable.
There was the description of, rather than sending a manuscript, whether that's paper or electronic, that's dozens or hundreds of pages every time there's a change to the translator, that the electronically a module could be shared. This topic has been changed. This is a concept or a reference or what have you. This has changed. Translate this. There may be like a minimum that they'd a translation house would have, but they wouldn't be charging you to look through the entire multi-100-page document over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's just one of many reasons why modular content is the only way to go if you're translating. One of many is, what do you send to translation when something changes? Because even if you've changed one sentence, if you send them 300 pages, they're going to have to look. Yeah, they're going to be looking. They're going to be looking. So the fourth thing is do the work. Oh, easier said than done. But you've planned it. You've planned it. You've determined your method. You found it. You bucketed it. You determined the methods. Now you got to roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Right.
And there's a set of best practices for how to do that work for another time. But now you finally got all four. I know you were on the edge of your seat for that.
I know, but there's such four big steps to take. And it kind of outlines that this whole idea of digital transformation is one thing, but then transforming the content to do it, it's like, it's another. And every step about that is just as huge, if not huger, the digital transformation itself.
Well, this is why it keeps failing. It keeps failing. Companies throw millions of dollars at these tools and nothing changes and nothing gets better. And they can't understand why, because they've got the same crappy content in expensive tools. They have expensive, crappy content. If you don't do the work, you don't get any change. So that's why up to now, I don't think we can really point to a lot of companies and say, gosh, they really did a great job with that digital transformation. And look how scalable. And look, they did it in 127 languages. Point, show me. I can't name one.
Fascinating stuff. And it's no wonder that you're on your fourth book. So tell us a little bit more about that. Do a show and tell on your book, if you would.
My book. This is my most recent book. It's probably backwards, right, for you?
Oh, it's perfect.
Oh,
It's
good.
good.
The Personalization Paradox. Why companies fail and how to succeed at delivering personalized experiences at scale. I memorized that title. It took me a long time. It just came out. It came out in March with my co-author, Regina Lynn Preciato, who happens to be a good friend and one of my employees. And it talks all about how to standardize your content, what to standardize and how to do it and why it's important, and how at the end of the day, if you want to deliver personalized experiences as part of your digital transformation, you have to do these things or you won't be able to scale it. So you can get it at Amazon, you can get it at Barnes & Noble, you can get it at my website, contentrules.com/TPP. And we have goodies if you get it from my website. And you can get
what kind of goodies? What goodies?
Extra things that we created to go around the book and, just extra. It's not M&Ms, but it's content M&Ms. How about that? You get content M&Ms.
There you go.
So,
You're fun, Val. Where else can people follow you, like on the socials?
Well, they can follow me on LinkedIn, is where I do a lot of posting. Certainly at contentrules.com, on our blog. We also have a newsletter that you can sign up for. And I'm on Twitter. I am not the best at tweeting, but I am at either Content Rules Inc. or at Val Swisher. And I hope people will join me because we are having fun and we're making changes. And I have really enjoyed this conversation as well. Thank you for having me.